So check this out. This is a culvert. You can see the ditch running in. Here's the rock in front of the culvert, and you can actually see under the road. You can see how that culvert runs in. We're actually shooting up underneath the road with the 360. Oh. And got it. I had to shake it forever. Man, they're not very aggressive today. This is the reason that I keep a drop shot in my box 365 days a year, is because it is so versatile. You can rig it weedless, you can nose hook it, apply different size weights for rate of fall, apply different plastics, catch smallmouth, largemouth, spotted bass. Works in clear water, dingy water, you name it, any depth. That's pretty much why I always keep one. 365 in the boat. I think what I realized early on in my career is that I was able to take techniques that I was confident in, a drop shot, right? I started fishing a drop shot when I was 12 years old. And so I've got a lot of time with it, and I was able to go to fisheries that weren't known for it. You know, places like Rayburn, Santee, Cooper. And when the fishing gets tough, those fish get a lot of pressure, you know, later in the year, I was able to pick up a drop shot and actually win tournaments on bodies of water that aren't really known for a lot of drop shotting. And I think it just gives those fish a different look. For me, it's a bait that I can fish shallow, right? I can fish it in a foot of water, or I can fish it out to 100 foot of water. There's no limitations to it, and it's adaptable to a lot of different conditions. You know, when I won at Santee Cooper, drop shotting was not in my game plan, but I happened to see some fish blow up, and on my way to where those fish were blowing up, I saw a brush pile on my 360. First thing I picked up was actually a big worm, because I knew we were on a big fish, you know, a body of water that has big fish. Problem was that bottom was real slimy, and every time I'd drag it through, my bait would come back with slime and the fish wouldn't eat it. Rig up a drop shot, pitch it out there, first cast, catch an 8-pounder. So, I mean, you know, sometimes it's just about getting that bait just up out of that muck and that slime. Even places like Florida. One of the nice things with a drop shot is that you don't have to have a bunch of different setups. I use the same rod, reel, and braid setup everywhere I go. When you're selecting a rod and a spinning reel, it's all about balance with finesse fishing. So what I tell people is, however you hold the rod, right? I'm 3 fingers forward on my spinning rod, sometimes 4, but wherever that forward facing finger lies, that's where you want your balance point to be. So a lot of times I'm holding my drop shot rod right here. You should be able to take that and perfectly balance that rod horizontal. That's gonna give you a lot more sensitivity in your rod. It doesn't matter, you could build it out of the best components, the best materials. If it's not balanced and it's tip heavy, you won't be able to feel those light bites. The only thing I change is the leader size. You know, I'll go anywhere from 6 all the way up to 12-pound test on my leader. And then the only other difference is the bait and the hook style, or how I'm gonna rig that bait based on the conditions and the cover I'm fishing. And then my weight size, and you can change your leader length, but everything else stays the same. So if you've got a spinning reel, you know, a lighter action rod, a medium light action rod, you're able to pick up a drop shot and fish it anywhere you live in the country. You can fish this. He got it. One of the things when I talk about drop shotting is versatility, right? Being able to apply a drop shot in different situations based on where those fish are living around the country. And these 2 setups right here are my go-to, I would say, probably 90% of the time. And I go back and forth depending on the cover. We've got a nose hook style here, just with a smaller open face hook. And then we've got a Texas rig style for more of your weedless cover applications. And then kind of the third one that mixes in there every once in a while is the exposed option. I'll use that a lot if I'm just dragging or drifting through river current situations. But I run the same rod and reel setup, right? We talked about balance, being able to have that rod lay horizontal with wherever your forward finger faces. That's super important. I can't stress that enough. So just make sure that when you're selecting a setup, your reel and your rod setup are balanced for that. And then all you have to do with those different setups is run the same braid, and then you're able to adjust your leader line size anywhere from 6-pound test all the way up to 12-pound test, depending on that type of cover. So the times that I'm not nose hooking a bait, where a nose hook's gonna give it a lot of freedom of movement, a lot of nose to tail movement, where you don't have anything restricting that bait. And then we've got a Texas rigged option for weedless with a finesse Nico, and that's going to still keep that bait being able to move up and down, but it gives it a little bit more quiver and rolling action in the water. And then the other option with that, using the same hook, is actually threading it on where you've got an exposed hook point. And that works really well for drifting situations. If I'm casting and dragging in more open water, it pushes that hook point back a little bit. So if you've got fish that are kind of finicky and they're short striking, whether it's on longer baits or even some of these smaller 3 to 3.5 inch baits, you'll match that hook size up and push that hook point back. So when they do get a hold of it, you've got a nice wide gap, you've got a good hook point going straight into their mouth, because it's always going to sit perfectly perpendicular against the roof of their mouth. So kind of the 3 setups that I use on my drop shot. Just remember, use each one properly based on the conditions that you're faced with. One thing that I do with my drop shot setup is I keep it fairly simple. I don't mess with a lot of different shapes and sizes. I've got the ones that I'm confident in, and you can kind of break it down into really 2 categories when you look here. I've got kind of my longer straight tail worms that are typically more largemouth oriented, cover oriented baits. And then I've got my smaller, minnow and kind of goby style baits. And those are more of my nose hook, or when I thread the bait onto the hook. And I keep it simple. I don't use a lot of different sizes. I'm really in that 3 to 4 inch size, and then I'll step up into kind of more of that 6 and 7 inch bait size. Keeping it simple. It seems that if I have confidence in those baits, the biggest thing is just getting it in front of the fish and applying it to the right application. When you talk about weights, you have one style of weights: teardrop. I don't use cylinder style. Really, you've got 2 different options, 3 options when it comes to styles of weights. As you can see, I'm a big fan of the teardrop style. It's kind of in between what we would call your cylinder or pencil style weights. Those work really well for grass situations. The downfall that I have with a cylinder weight is that you have a much smaller surface area touching the bottom, so you don't have as much information relayed back to you. When you look at a teardrop style weight, it comes through the cover well because it's tapered, but you've got that wider bottom that allows more bottom contact and creates more sensitivity through your rod, right? It gives more surface area to transmit back to your hand and your rod. That's why I prefer the teardrop. Then you've also got the round style. I don't use the round style as much because it seems to want to get hung up as more. So teardrop style, kind of in between, gives me the benefit of both worlds. I'd carry everything from an 1/8 ounce all the way up to 3/4. I would say 1/4 and 3/8 I use the most, but there's different factors for that. Types of cover and rate of fall, right? If I'm fishing shallow, I tend to lean more toward the lighter weights. As I get deeper, I go to deeper weights, or if you have real heavy current, kind of my rule of thumb is always getting away with the lightest weight possible is going to get you more bites. And so I'll start light and step it up as I need to keep bottom contact depending on depth, current, and even wind conditions.